What to do if your diesel doesn't start in the winter? Or what are all the reasons it might not be starting? So number one, dead batteries. One thing about diesels is most of them have 2 batteries. So if your batteries are dead, you're trying to get it to start, or you're cranking it and it might be cranking, it might not sound like a gas or a 1 battery vehicle when it's dead. You might have stuff lighting up and enough for you to say, I don't think it's the batteries, they seem fine. Well, really the best way is to bring them to O'Reilly's or wherever and get the batteries tested, or else just at least bust out a voltmeter and see what kind of volts you're getting on them. But they should be at least 11.5 if the vehicle's not running, probably at least 12.5, probably more towards 13 when it's idling. But so that's your first thing, check your batteries. Second thing is your fuel. You're gonna want to make sure your fuel isn't gelled up. If it's cold enough and the mixture around your town doesn't have the right kind of fuel, or you cheaped out and bought the cheap fuel, then your fuel might be gelled up and, well, it's gonna sound like an engine that's lacked of fuel, starved of fuel. So if that happens to you, there's there's one filter on the fuel rail. Not sure if you can see it from where I was pointing this, but then the other one's down here, so you can get 2 new fuel filters. Or else what I'd probably do is just try to get the truck into a garage or somewhere heated and just let everything thaw out first and see how bad it really is. But I'd probably do filters too. They're not too bad, probably like $50 for 2 of them. Now the third and last thing is probably one of the most important, and that's going to be using the right kind of engine oil. So in the winter, you're going to want to run a thinner oil. I see a lot of guys that don't. So a 5W40 oil versus a 15W40. And your 5W40 is obviously thinner, and it makes starting these old diesels up way easier. That, and also I use arc oil fuel additive, or oil additive. And so far both the trucks have been starting up fine, and they haven't been plugged in. So it's been about it was negative 35 with the wind a few days ago, like negative 10, 15 without it. I think today is negative something. So we're going to see, this thing's been sitting for a while, so we're going to see if we can get her to fire. Oh, last trick. So the last thing is, if you're really down bad, you can spray starter fluid in there. If yours doesn't look like this, it's probably red. So that's what you're going to want to spray it on. Don't use too much, just quick snort. Really probably doesn't need it. You're probably chasing your tail with something else, but see if this thing will fire. Oh, we missed it. Come on, baby. She wants that onions. It is cold. Toto. Look at that, a 6.0 with no check engine light or ABS light on. Dime a dozen. Alright. Another thing that you might want to watch out for is, what messed with me is when I first got this truck from the auction and I got it back here and I don't know what happened, but for some reason my inertia switch actually broke. It wasn't tripped, it wasn't turning off the fuel pump, but the switch itself couldn't get a load through it. So if that thing's not, if it's either, you might just have to click it if it's tripped, but if you need a new one, obviously if the inertia switch doesn't work, it's not going to give your fuel pump any fuel, and you might think it's gelled up when really just might be chasing your tail. We're going to let her warm up. Alright, she's all warmed up, so we're gonna see, we're gonna go get a car wash, and I'll tell you guys the last tip and trick to getting your diesel to start. I really don't recommend this tip, but I'll give it to you while we're going through the wash here. So the reason I say to bring the batteries in to get them tested, if you're thinking that that's it, which it's almost always should be your first step when you're trying to diagnose something with a vehicle, but when you bring them into O'Reilly's or somewhere and you have them test them, their machine can test for cold cranking amps, and it'll measure how much heat's coming off the battery, so it really just gives you a better test than you could put your voltmeter on them, and it's really not going to tell you all that much. But if you're in a pinch and you're kind of thinking it might not be the batteries, and you could just kind of go off the voltmeter, but just keep that in mind. Also, I think I said that second fuel filter, or the one that's under the cab, I think I said it's on the fuel rail or whatever, but it'll be on the frame rail, and just follow the fuel lines from your fuel tank and you'll see it. Ice flying everywhere. Luckily there's no car right behind me. Come on, push this big truck off you. There you go. I can barely get this truck in there. It's too long with the long box. Alright. So we got it back home, just got her all washed up. So now I give you the last tip on how to get these to start, but those are pretty much all your basic tips and what to watch out for first. Check off the boxes. But one thing quick that I forgot to mention, and obviously I didn't do this in this one because I wanted you guys to see what it'd be like trying to start on one crank, but You can obviously cycle your keys several times before you try to start it, and that'll get your glow plugs as warm as they can be before you see if it'll go. But the last tip that I don't recommend doing it because it's hard on them and it hurts them in the end, and probably even worse than starting fluid. But if you're really having a tough time and you're down to your last bullet, you can always pull out the last card and just swear at it